Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks so much for clicking here on another video. And today we're going to be talking about a brand new film hitting theaters later this weekend that I got to check out a little bit early, and that film is simply titled Drop. Directed by Christopher Landon, this film stars people like Meghann, Fahy, Sklenar, Violett, Beane, Jeffrey Self, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, if you guys like early reviews like this, then definitely subscribe, because every week I have new and early reviews here on the channel for big movies as well as TV shows and all sorts of fun content here on the channel, like retrospective reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog. So definitely hit that subscribe button. But if you're a returning subscriber, well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it every single time all of you come here to listen to me talk about another movie. And as I already mentioned, we're talking about Drop, which comes from director Christopher Landon, who is definitely no stranger to when it comes to very over-the-top horror comedies or things that are very tongue-in-cheek. Now, this film isn't necessarily a full-blown horror comedy, but it definitely knows what it is and gets goofy at times, as this director has done things like Freaky as well as the Happy Death Day films in the past as well. So I thought that was an interesting choice and probably a solid choice for a film like this. But before we get into my thoughts on the film, let's get into what this film is all about. Drop focuses on the character of Violett, played by Meghann Fahy, who is going out on a date for the first time after quite some time. She has her young son Toby, played by Jacob Robinson, who's actually a really cute online personality that I've seen in videos where his mom films him. This is actually his film debut, so it was nice to see him in this film. He's a very cute kid on social media, and it was cute to see him in this film as well. He's not given an abundance to do on an acting level, which I wouldn't really expect, but it was cute to see him. But back to the plot, Violett is going on a very first date for the first time in a very long time because she unfortunately dealt with domestic abuse. She's coming from a really dark past, and her ex unfortunately is no longer with them due to a very traumatic incident that happened when her son was a baby. I won't get too much deeper into what happened there, but she's afraid to get out there again and meet somebody to unfortunately find herself in the same situation. That's when she goes on this date with this guy named Henry, played by Sklenar, who I only ever saw in It Ends With Us, and I'm not really familiar with this guy, but I think he's so charming in both this film and It Ends With Us. And I think right out of the gate, the chemistry between both of our two leads is really solid here. But yes, they go on this date only for her to start getting airdrops and messages from some mysterious individual who is threatening to take out her son if she does not follow the rules and does not tell her date or anybody else in the restaurant that she's receiving these messages and tell them what these messages are saying. And so that's the general gist of the film. I will say, having seen the trailer for this film many times before a lot of movies that I've seen over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, I do think the trailer shows way too much of this film. So I'm not going to say much more, but that is the general gist here, which I thought was really interesting because on one hand, this is a chamber piece in a lot of ways. There is a location that is used in the early part and the very end of the film, but for the most part, majority of the film takes place in one central location in this high-rise, nice, fancy restaurant that these two characters are at, having this romantic dinner that of course goes awry. And I'll start this off by saying that the cast is phenomenal here. I think they're easily what, definitely elevates the material here, and majority of this film lies on their shoulders. When it comes down to a film like this that isn't going for extravagance with big storytelling, with a bunch of layered characters and a bunch going on in a bunch of different locations, it really relies on the script, the dialogue, and the characters and the actors, and they really have to be able to sell those moments. And I think Meghann and Brandon have great chemistry in this film. There's a great endearing charm immediately to this first date kind of awkward meeting of these two individuals and them starting to kind of get to know each other as this starts to kind of play out. And when Brandon is aware of the fact that she's getting these messages initially in these airdrops, he tries to help her. And I think this film also does a good job of kind of keeping you on your toes. Who is it? It's definitely a whodunit in a lot of ways. Who is it that's messaging her? Is it somebody that's in the restaurant? Is it somebody outside of the restaurant? Is it her date? Who knows? And I think for the most part, this film does a good job of keeping you on your toes. There's definitely a couple of misdirects that are so obvious if you've seen films like this. Like, of course, there's the person or the people that she thinks it may be, and you almost know from a writing perspective that it's not going to be that individual whatsoever. And so I think for the most part, this film tries to do a couple misdirects that feel familiar and predictable, but there is some nice surprise at certain moments, especially as some of the reveals start to happen later on in the film. But yeah, when it came down to the cast, I thought that they definitely elevated the material here, with Meghann Fahy definitely carrying the film in a lot of ways. She has to, be the central character. She's the one that has to react to so many of these moments, and the other actors can't play off of what she knows because they don't know what she knows. And I think that she's able to really elevate a lot of these moments through her performance, through a lot of facial acting and nuance, and a lot of that is really heightened as well by this interesting creative choice to have moments where they kind of hone in on a certain character and the lighting really hones in on them. The audio will kind of cut out, and sometimes you'll have these moments that are kind of cut from reality where you're in the character's head, or the character is seeing different people in the room in a different light, so to speak, and not the way that they actually are in that room, which on one hand sometimes was a little bit distracting, and sometimes I felt kind of came off a little bit goofy. There's one scene in particular where they used this tactic that I thought was a little bit strange, but for the most part I thought was an interesting filmmaking choice throughout the course of the film. And again, I think that Meghann Fahy just is a really solid piece to that. So when they were able to do that with her, I thought it was a really good way to get into the character's head. Brandon Sklenar, as I already mentioned, I think is a really charming actor, and I think he brings that here. He definitely employs what makes him a fun and likable character, and I, again, really found him to be an interesting part playing off of Meghann in this film. There's also some great levity in this film as well, especially in the first half, and for the most part, this is a fairly funny movie, and a lot of that has to do with very natural dialogue, because it's a film where you have this awkward kind of back and forth of these two people that are, you know, really into one another, and they both haven't been on a date in quite some time, and they're trying to figure it out, and there's this great back and forth that doesn't feel like forced when it comes down to humor, and oftentimes just feels like those kind of cute jitters that you get at the beginning of a date like this. And I thought that that's where the film really tackled some really interesting and clever dialogue back and forth that kept me interested, that kept me laughing, but also kept me like, oh man, what's going on, as she's starting to get these messages. And so I was really actually impressed with the first half of the film and that dialogue flow and a lot of the moments that are starting to kind of pick up some of the tension in the film. And where I was really impressed with the levity is their waiter in the mix, which is the character of Matt, played by Jeffrey Self, who I did not think was going to be such a funny character throughout the course of the film. When you're first introduced to him, he's this very elaborate, very flamboyant actor who is just doing this as a side gig, but as you get to see him over the course of the film and he steps into certain moments that are a little bit awkward, a little bit tense, he was a great character to kind of break the tension of these scary moments that she's in a lot of times with some of the humor without it ever feeling like too much. And I felt like that's where the film was able to strike a solid balance of levity, but also have some great drama and tension. And I just really want to praise the cast, because I think a lot of that goes on their shoulders, but also want to praise the writers, because I think for the most part, this is a film that really relies on solid dialogue to really make these moments work. With all of that said, I was a little bit shaky with where the film started to go in the latter part, because while it is consistently fun, engaging, never boring, and always gripping to watch because there is high stakes as times, you know, is going on in the film, there were moments where it started to feel like they were trying to invent reasons for them to get up from their table, whether it be the main character Violett, played by Meghann, or Brandon Sklenar's character Henry. It felt like there was just so many moments in the film in the latter half where she would get up because, you know, she got a message and she'd have to make up some lie to go do this and that, and then 3 seconds later they get back, and then she'd get up and go do something else again, and then she'd come back and sit down, and then he'd get up and go do something, and there was so many back and forth that both of them getting up. And I feel like there was a certain point where it felt like the story didn't have enough meat on the bones past that first half, to where it felt like they were just kind of inventing silly reasons to get them to get up from the table. For the most part, I think it all kind of plays into the movie and plays into pushing the story forward, but there was a certain point where I was like, bro, like, you just sat down and you're getting back up again, now you just sat down. And I almost wish there was more dialogue in those moments instead of inventing little reasons for these characters to get up. Somebody spills something on them, somebody, again, she gets a message, you know, somebody gets their attention, somebody passes out over there. There was just so many little things that happened that consistently had our characters sitting down, getting up, sitting down, getting up, and it was a lot of times just one of them with the other one being left at the table. And it was in those moments where I felt like the film was maybe meandering ever so slightly. But again, I do say that having the knowledge that it also pushed the story forward in a lot of ways. You know, it definitely never left things feeling stagnant. It was just something that felt like they maybe could have done a little bit something different there instead of this consistent up, down, up, down, up, down. Another thing I want to add in here really quickly as well is that the film does tackle the idea of domestic abuse. You know, I already mentioned that our character Meghann does deal with domestic abuse from her past, and that really kind of lives with her when it comes down to trauma in this film. And we learn that Brandon's character also has some trauma from abuse of different kinds, and the film tackles manipulators, gaslighters, and just the idea of individuals who try to manipulate the emotions and the brains of so many people in their lives. And so I feel like this film definitely has like a nice takeaway too in terms of thematic elements about domestic abuse and about abuse in general, whether it be manipulation, whether it be physical abuse, whether it be, you know, scare tactics, whatever the case may be. The film doesn't lean into that too much for the entirety of the runtime, but there is definitely certain moments in the film where the movie will stop to kind of touch on the idea of domestic abuse and how it affects our main characters here, which I did really enjoy the way it was handled and the dialogue around that. When it comes down to the humor though, like I said, I think this film does strike a great balance of humor and tension and drama, but at the same time, I thought in the latter half of the film, maybe in the last 15 minutes, it got a little too goofy for its own good, where there were certain moments where it was just like, okay, now this just feels kind of stupid, you know? There's even a reveal at the very end of the masked individual in the film. There's one individual who's part of the bad guys who is in a mask, who they have dramatic music as he takes off his mask, and it's supposed to be this big reveal, but it was the most obvious reveal possible because of how it was set up earlier in the film, that it just felt like if you watch a lot of movies, you're going to see that coming from a mile away. So I don't know if that was meant to come off silly or if it was meant to be this big reveal. For me, it just came off so obvious that it just kind of came off a little bit flat. And so I would say that there were moments in the third act that for me kind of felt like, okay, we need to kind of bring this to a head. We need to kind of wrap this up. So let's, you know, kind of quickly do this, quickly do that, have a couple of things that you kind of have to like suspend your disbelief for silliness purposes. And then, you know, cool, the movie wraps up and then with a nice little bow on top. So in a lot of ways, it had a very conventional wrap up to the story that didn't necessarily feel like it pushed the envelope in the same way that I thought the first half of the film did, because I found the first half to be really creative and fun and inventive with its dialogue and the reasons our characters are getting up and kind of having to figure things out over time. But it just kind of felt like maybe they just didn't have enough story to kind of pad it out as time went on. But with that said, this is like, I think like an hour and 40-minute movie. It's not very long whatsoever. It does not overstay its welcome for the most part. It was entertaining to watch. I really enjoyed it. It's a little silly and stupid for its own good at times, but for the most part, I do think there are moments where it's silly and stupid for the right reasons, and it definitely elevates the movie. The theater I was in had people laughing. I was definitely included, sometimes because of how stupid the movie got, but also because there were moments that were genuinely funny in the film. The tensions were high, and it was just an interesting, clever, fun idea that I think that when it works, it really works. And when it didn't work, it maybe didn't work, you know, in moments, but it was never a situation where I felt like, oh, this movie's starting to lose me. It was always just more of a situation of going like, I don't know if I love that creative choice. But for the most part, I think that this is going to be a film that is going to be a crowd pleaser for people in the theaters. It's going to definitely be one of those films where people can talk to the screen and make it like not feel like too obnoxious, where people can kind of talk to each other and have a laugh at some of these moments. It's also one of those movies that I can see doing well on streaming down the line. I think this is one of those movies that a family can get together and talk to each other and talk at the screen in a fun way with the characters. And there's enough levity in the film as well where you feel like you'll almost be able to kind of laugh with the film, laughing with you at the same time. I hope that makes sense. But for the most part, I found this to be an entertaining, good time that I really enjoyed, and I highly recommend. I think if you're a fan of fun, tense, you know, kind of thrillers that don't take themselves too seriously and have a great sense of humor as well, then I think you'll enjoy this. And if you're a fan of Christopher Landon's previous works with things like Freaky or the Happy Death Day films and the tone of those films, then I think you'll definitely enjoy yourself here. So that's going to be my thoughts on Drop. Definitely look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. So hit that like button down below if you guys enjoyed the video. Comment your thoughts on the film. Are you planning on checking that out? Have you already checked it out? I know it was part of the AMC Unseen as well yesterday as of filming this, so maybe some of you have already seen it. Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.